One is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is a real estate investment coach, no other than Miss Amelia Misenheimer.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Welcome on Book 101, Miss Amelia. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, my name is Amelia Misenheimer. I am currently based out of Indiana in the United States, but I have been investing in real estate since 2010. And I really believe that people need to talk more about investing and what does that really look, especially as women, as we plan our financial futures and different life events that happen. So, really just encouraging that conversation and being strategic about our wealth investments, whether it's real estate or, another investment strategy, whichever is right for you, because that's an important part of investing. It needs to be right for you. But like I said, I've been investing in real estate since 2010. We actually own property internationally. We own property in the United States. So it's been a really fun endeavor. And I truly believe real estate is the best way to build wealth that really survives the test of time.
Totally empowering topic. Miss Amelia, let's build wealth. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world.
Thank
And
you.
today, let's talk about money. For sure. Tell us, why is it talking about money still one of our culture's last great taboos? Often considered more awkward than discussing politics or religions or sex.
It really is, and it is a shame because money makes the world go round, for lack of a better terminology. But I think though it's really difficult too is it's easy to discuss money on this grandiose scale, and you hear politicians talk about it, or you hear big business people talk about it, or you hear, you can read books about it. But it's really hard to have that intimate conversation about what are you investing in and what's attainable for me to invest in. And it really starts with the family and how you're raised, and do your parents have these conversations? But then your friends, do you know what your friends make for income? Does it matter? Not really, but it's important to know because it gives you perspective of what you could be making in life. And I think that's part of it too. Is sometimes we sell ourselves a little short, and when you realize, like, oh, my best friend is making what, that means it's attainable for me too. And that's the part of discussing money that is pivotal, because it gives hope to those around us that, like, if I can do it, you can do it, and vice versa. And I think that's the part that people don't want us to talk about, because it keeps us small, because we're scared, we're intimidated, we're afraid to invest. But also, when you realize it's tangible, it's, you can do it too, anybody can do it. It's a very empowering.
Truly empowering, Miss Amelia. And what distinguishes a real conversation about wealth from just talking about prices or surface level financial news?
I think the real difference when you talk about wealth is it's usually a long-term conversation, right? Like, nobody, you don't get rich overnight. And if you do, fabulous. I hope you have a great team to support you, because you won't be able to keep on to it. So, the more that you can learn and invest slowly over time, that's the true path to wealth. So these people that are, buy a penny stock, or, Bitcoin's going to make you rich. Well, yeah, if you bought Bitcoin 10 years ago and held on to it, it will make you rich. But people don't always discuss that time aspect of it. So, and it's not one thing. And I think that's the other part of wealth that people don't discuss is it's not just real estate, or it's not just Bitcoin, or it's not just stocks. It's having that diversification, playing the tax game, playing, the strategy, having all those little pieces come together that really truly build that wealth that will last beyond you into the next generation, but also having the strategy to protect your wealth. And all of those pieces come together. And I think that's what's scary too, is you look at it from the outside and you're like, how do I build this whole wealth strategy? And it's one step at a time is really what it comes down to.
One step at a time, baby step, people, baby steps. And
Absolutely.
how do we begin to separate the emotions of money from the numbers on the spreadsheets to have a productive dialogue?
There you'll never fully separate emotion and money. And I've heard that your subconscious beliefs in money are set before you're 7 years old. So, how you were raised really affects how you believe, how you feel about money. And that totally comes through to your adulthood and how you make decisions. So, one, embracing that, like embracing your money stories that you were raised with, that have been told over the years, or that you watched your parents do, because they're really there and they're real things. So, you might as well embrace it and learn how. But also, it's just, it's just taking those little baby steps that matter, and it can be $10 a week, and I think that's the other side of this is people don't want to admit that, like, oh, I can't do this, or I can only do this. Great, only do what you can do. But having that confidence that you are taking a step to better your future self is huge. And that slowly over time will build confidence. And then building that confidence is then where you become more emotionally intelligent about money, and you're more confident in making those decisions, and you can analyze deals better. But nobody became an expert overnight. They all learn from trial and error, and every big guru you see has more than likely gone broke once, if not twice, and that's how they learn. But nobody wants to, reinforce that part of the topic. But embrace your emotions and have clarity around them. Like for real estate, there's properties I don't like. I don't like the tenant who lives there. I don't like visiting the house. And so I have that emotional reaction when my phone rings and it's that, their name showing up. And I have to catch myself doing that too, because we're all human. We are all going to have emotion around it. And it's really what you do with that emotion and how you harness it that's going to make the long term difference in your life.
Long term difference for sure. On the practicalities of conversation, what is the low stakes, non threatening way to broach a real money conversation with a partner, family member, or close friend?
I think, well, be clear with what you're kind of hoping to get out of it. Do you want a stock tip out of this, or do you want to have, an open dialogue about how they just bought their new car or things like that? I have a good friend that she's never discussed money. So through our friendship, we have just started discussing money a lot more. But she was never aware of this world of, we'll call it freelance, the side hustle culture. But she was able to pick up a couple contracting jobs that she would have never even thought about getting had we not had these conversations, because in her world it was never attainable. So sometimes it can be as simple as asking somebody, like, hey, what do you really do? Or, I see you are a teacher, which, is a moderate salary, but like you have these other, investments, expenses. How do you do it? And it could simply they live really frugally, or they'll be like, oh, actually I also, do this on the side, or I invested, or I inherited, and I think people don't always give precedence. Like, they started with a leg up, and that's fine. They should not be hated for that. Nobody should be, um, canceled for any of that, but embrace it and admit it, own it, because you do have a different advantage than a lot of other people do. And just and genuinely asking with a caring attitude, and not just judging or sneering, or, approach it with a vulnerable intention, and you'll get some amazing answers.
Amazing answer for sure. And how does the vocabulary we use, like, I can't afford that versus that's not my priority for my budget, frame our mindset and how others perceive our financial situation?
That is huge. And that takes years of, awareness to really build. And that gets back to this, subconscious beliefs that are set by our parents before we're 7. So really paying attention to the words you use around money. There's a ton of great books. Psychology of Money is very fascinating. It has a lot of, factoids about money and things like that. But being aware of the words you use, like your perfect example, Daniel, I can't afford that. Can you really do you want to afford that? Let's start with that. Do you even want that thing, or is it just not in your priority list of things to buy? You've got other priorities and you'd rather have that money buy other things, and owning that too, versus playing, the, oh, well, I can't go out tonight because I can't afford it. No, you can't go out because you're saving your money to pay your bills, or you're saving your money to do more important things than a night out. And I think shifting that ownership of how and where you spend your money really empowers you as a person to go from that victimhood to really go into that ownership hood and taking, charge in your life to accomplish new, great, better things that align with your goals.
Align with your goals. And for couples, what are the essential rules of engagement for a financial conversation that leads to alignment instead on argument?
That that is a great question. So as money is one of the major causes of divorce, it's a huge cause of conflict in most relationships. So really, it comes down to transparency and honesty, and being able to have those conversations with your spouse, partner, of where money's going to, your bills, and there's a lot of shame around it. That if you have credit card debt and your partner doesn't know, or things like that, that really kind of come up that drive the wedge between partnerships, and in spending where your values aren't aligned. So if you're, decide together we want to save a down payment for a house, and then all of a sudden your partner's, off buying a new boat, like that's a value misalignment, which is where those issues come up. So then it's, why did they go buy a new boat? Is it they don't really want the new house? Is it, are they avoiding the conversation? And and there's probably need for a therapist to help walk you through some of those conversations, because they are so dicey and can be so emotional.
How can adult children respectfully initiate conversations with aging parents about estate planning, wills, and their financial wishes without seeming greedy or intrusive?
You know, that is becoming more and more prevalent every day and becoming more and more important. They say there's like $28 trillion wealth transfer that's coming up with this older generation, passing their inheritance on to the next generation. So part of it's just wisdom to have it. But there's different ways to bring it up. You can talk about it in the form of taxes. A lot of people don't understand the complication that they can leave their estate in, with either without a will or an unclear will, or not being strategic about, like, for example, with real estate, they have what they call a step up in basis. So if you inherit a property after somebody passes away, you inherit it at the value of today's market. So if somebody bought a house 50 years ago for, $30,000, and now it's worth $400,000, you don't have to pay taxes on any of that increase in value, which is huge. And then it goes on to the next generation. If they want to sell that home or live in the home or whatever else, that 400,000 as our example number is the new basis. So if they sell it for 350,000, they actually get a claim of loss. Or if they sell it for 450,000, they only pay taxes on that 50,000. And so a lot of people are a little more open to the conversation when it's approached in a, I'll call it a strategic way of like, look, look, mom, I really want to have a good idea of what you're planning on your estate. And if you don't want to tell me, that's fine, but I want to know that you have spoken with an estate attorney or you have a plan, because I don't want to pay extra in taxes. I don't want my, estate to be tied up in probate for the next 2 years. And there have been multiple people I've spoken to that have been dealing with estates for years because of either disagreements among family members, or there was not clear action, so they have to go through the entire legal process to work through things. And I think approaching it with the avoidance of the problems sometimes goes better than what are you doing with your money, and having that more confrontational conversation.
Miss Amelia, how does an imbalance in income or net worth between partners create unspoken power dynamics? And how can couple talk about it ensure does not damage the relationship?
Again, therapists are great for some of this. But I think a lot of it is the clarity. So having prenup agreements before going into a relationship, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. As the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey, and watching all of this play out in real life, and they're talking about
Mhm.
prenups. It's really brought a lot of this stuff to the forefront of having this conversation. And yes, none of us are like Taylor Swift, but it's still discussing what's important to you, what you bring to the relationship, and then what's expected, and having that, just clarity of boundaries and expectations, because it doesn't matter what you and your partner agree on. There is no right answer, there's no wrong answer. And I think that's the trouble with some of this wealth too, is that there's no perfect answer. There's no handbook that says do it this way and your life will be great, because we're all humans, we're all individuals. So the more you build that dynamic, and whatever that dynamic is, it has to work for you and your partner. And if somebody else has an opinion about it, they're not part of your marriage. They're not part of your relationship. And having that boundary of saying, no, this is how our marriage is, this is how our relationship is, and this is what works for us. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Yes, indeed. And Miss Amelia, as a real estate investment coach, what are your short term and long term goals?
Oh, great question. So my short-term goals, I would love to get my hands on a like 8 to 15 unit apartment complex here in the Midwest. As the market's changing and shifting, I see a lot of opportunity there, and that would really kind of help diversify my personal portfolio, which excites me. My long-term goals, my one of my long-term goals is $50,000 a month in passive income. And so, that's something that I continue to strive for, and it's being built out in several different ways. But I think, again, having those goals, and what's funny is when I told somebody my goal of 50,000 a month in passive income, which was, a big stretch for me, they look at me and they're like, "Oh, I think you should make that to be 100,000 a month, because money just doesn't go as far as it used to." And I just remember being flabbergasted, because that was already a scary number for me. But, this advice was coming from somebody who's older, who's, their big scary goal turned out to be nothing, and they, flew past it in their lifetime. So they were like, you really need to up your goal. So I think having that awareness too, that when you share your goals, it is a vulnerable moment. Just sharing it here on the internet is a vulnerable moment, but they're just a goal. And whether you get close, you go past, you're still better off than where you were.
Yes, for sure. And good luck to your goals and looking forward for more success, Miss Amelia.
Thank you.
And can you please give a piece of advice for those people out there want to be like you?
I ask the questions. I have gotten myself in more trouble in more rooms by asking the questions that apparently nobody else asks. So I think learning and taking that step and taking action, and whether you start investing $10 a week, or you decide you want to buy your first investment property, whatever it is, just start taking action, because you're only going to learn by taking action. You can read all the books, you can study, you can watch YouTube, you can do it all, but until you put, where the rubber meets the road, you're not truly going to learn. And you also don't build the self confidence until you learn the hard way and you learn the lessons. And then you realize, hey, I survived this. I can do hard things. And that's probably the most empowering feeling as an independent human, having that, like, oh, I did that. And we need more of that in our lives.
Yes, I did it. I did it. Just do like that, people.
Mhm.
Be proud of yourself. And thank you for the advice, Miss Amelia. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
So I have two books that really influenced my journey. They're pretty typical real estate, but Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Oh,
I think, is a
yes.
great, and I don't always agree. I don't agree with all of everything he says, but the principle of the matter and learning how money works and debt works is super important. And then the other one is E Myth, and it's about systems and systematizing your life, but it really takes you back to reflect on the systems, and it's not always a people problem. Usually it's a system problem. So if things are breaking down, or you're getting frustrated, or why isn't this working, it's usually a breakdown in the system before it's an attack of the person. And that can be taken back to anywhere in life, our marriages, our friendships. What are we expecting, why is it not happening, and what in that system is breaking, versus you're an idiot and you can't do it right. So usually it's a
Yes.
systems process, and I think that has been a very powerful mindset shift for me as I approach business, investing, professional relationships, things like that.
Thank you for the recommended books, Miss Amelia. And how do we start age appropriate positive money conversation with children to set them up for a healthy financial future?
Really, it's just being open and honest. My parents, I was raised with a very open conversation about money. I had my first checking account when I was 6. I wrote my first check for my first bicycle when I was 12, and my parents walked me through every one of those steps. So I think it's important to be open with your kids and really teach them, with the world of credit cards and tapping and phone payment, we're losing a lot of that transactional, here's a dollar, go buy something kind of aspect. So really trying to bring it back to that money and showing them the power of money and the value of money. I think it's really the best way to start having those conversations is just being transparent in your own life and your own choices.
Miss Amelia, can you share a story how you applied a principle from your real life experiences about money?
Um, I mean, I apply it every day. You know, I think one of the stories that really kind of got to me the most, and this is, kind of going back to childhood, but I remember going with my parents to collect rent on a rental property. They hadn't paid their rent. It was Christmas, and they had toys that we did not have. So my mom, approached it and was like, you've got, they had a go kart. That's how we got a go kart. My mom was like, well, I'll take that go kart for rent for this month if you want to give it, or you can move out before Christmas. And the kid came out of the living room and said, you can have my go-kart, I want to stay in my home for Christmas. The mom wasn't going to make that decision, the kid had to come out and make that decision, which is just, the kid was my age, to
Mm-hmm.
see as child to child that dynamic, and watching this kid have to make this decision was just, I mean, it still affects me today. And I think, having that respect for money, having that respect for other people's decisions and what they want to do with their money is one thing, but also realizing that when you invest, especially like in real estate, you become somebody's landlord. You're providing a home for somebody to raise their family in. And there is a dynamic to that, but respecting also the fact that you're providing shelter, you're providing housing in your community, and you're providing a place for families to have Christmas is such an important part of investing that it matters to you and I. Like, yes, it's rental, yes, there's money, that yes, there's return on investment, but it's also Christmases and families and scrape knees and birthdays and all of those things that go with it. That this is our life, their life, and to really embrace the humanity of investing.
Yes, embrace it, people. Embrace it while you're still young. And before we wrap up our discussion today, Miss Amelia, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its fourth season, I'm a baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Miss Amalia, if we all got better at having real conversation about wealth, what would be the collective impact on families, communities, and even our mental health?
It really, I think it's the self-confidence and building that can-do attitude is having those hard conversations, building that wealth, having that financial security blanket if you need to leave a situation you no longer want to be a part of. Having those resources is really what changes life. It allows you to help somebody else who may or may not have those resources, but it gives you the freedom to make different choices. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. Whether you need to leave, stay, invest, help, grow, donate. I mean, it becomes the world is your oyster. And until you have that security, until you have that confidence, you're just another cog in the wheel of the world. So breaking out of that rat race, if you will, um, really gives you the freedom and flexibility to make different choices and to help others.
And to help others for sure, Miss Amelia. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, please. I am on Instagram, LinkedIn. Please follow me. It's Amelia Misenheimer, Amelia G. Misenheimer. But if you want to have conversations about wealth or get more clarity about wealth or investing, I am here for any conversations.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Amelia Misenheimer because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering wealth and coaching to come. So, Miss Amelia, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. This has been great.
More to come, people. See you soon.